Alright, so I'm Angus Rawle, and I'm looking at bacteria and carbon interactions in the microbial loop.
Now, what the hell does that mean?
It's not exactly so straightforward. So basically you've got this concept called the microbial loop, and it's pretty fundamental to a lot of aquatic ecology, and the idea is that you've got algae in the water, and these algae, they eat up all the sunlight and they absolutely love it, and they pump out all these nice things, which is essentially algae poo, but everything else likes it. And this sort of...
I thought algae were plants.
Yeah, they're photosynthetic bacteria.
How do they poo? I didn't know plants
I think
poo.
they're cells, so they just let stuff out.
Stuff. See, this is a whole new idea for me.
Yeah. Well, they just, it's whether, like, they just excrete stuff, like, plants do excrete. I'm not a plant biologist.
Sap comes out of trees.
Yeah, I don't know what sap is.
Okay. Don't you?
No, I think it's like sugary
Yeah.
stuff. I always just thought it was
stuff.
Plant blood because I'm a fool, but...
Okay, so algae poo.
It's sort of, yeah, algae poo, or when the algae like explodes essentially, like it something ruptures the cell, it'll let all the stuff outside the cell just go. And that's sort of like these really simple little carbon molecules, almost like little sugar. In experiments we use glucose as a substitute or more as a similar form of carbon for algal carbon. So it's just sugar, really. And the bacteria munches this sugar up and absolutely loves it. And then these bigger ones, these sort of lurkers called nanoflagellates, they eat the bacteria which have eaten the carbon. And they're these weird things. They're just tiny, almost little pods with little wriggly tails, and so they can move themselves around wherever they want to go. And then they're eaten by something called the ciliates, which are these almost big hairy ball things.
And they do this.
Yeah, they sort of just hang around and they can also use their fuzzy things to sort of beat the water towards themselves.
Like...
Yeah, they're like, come to me, food, come to me.
Yeah.
Ultimate laziness, I quite like it. And then the ciliates are eaten by these things called the zooplankton, which they're planktonic, which means they don't really control where they go. They sort of just go with the flow, essentially, literally. And they also do the same thing, they beat water towards themselves. And they'll eat these ciliates, which are quite small compared to them. So this is just a gradient of size, almost. So things just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
So we start with the algae poo.
Well, yeah,
that's the tiniest element in the loop.
Yeah.
And we finish with the zooplankton?
Mm-hmm. That's
just the start of another loop, isn't it?
That's the question that we're sort of trying to figure out, is whether it ends with the zooplankton. Because with the zooplankton, they either poo out or they die and release the carbon back into the system, and it either sinks into the soil or the carbon gets released into the air.
Yep.
Or it can link to higher parts of the food chain, like macroinvertebrates, which are just bugs.
What's an example of that?
Like a little baby dragonfly.
Oh, okay. So we're talking, we should clarify at the outset that we're talking about freshwater systems.
Yes, things in the water.
In the freshwater.
Yeah. And whether or not this carbon actually travels up the microbial loop, which is traditionally thought to be quite like closed. So essentially the nutrients and the carbon get remineralized or released and then are somehow put back into the system.
Yeah.
Or whether they go up into the higher orders.
Or do both.
Or do both. And it's looking like they might do both based on what ecosystem they're in. Because it's ecology, everything's different depending on where it is.
Every situation.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a situation? Like a seagrass meadow would be, although that's not freshwater.
Yeah, no.
Okay,
just a normal river. Well, I'll give an example with what I specifically do, which is allochthonous carbon. I've been talking about something called... Okay, so there's the algal carbon that I was just talking about. It's called autochthonous carbon. Autochthonous, like autochthonous. I've never known what the chthonous means.
We'll find out.
And then you've got allochthonous. And the allochthonous comes from the outside of the system.
Yep.
And that's essentially, so you've either got this algal carbon, or say you've got leaves that fall off a tree and leach their little carbon molecules into the water.
Yeah.
Or a dead animal falls in the water and lets its carbon out. And what it's thought is that this carbon totally decouples the loop from its reliance on the algae poo. And this can essentially stimulate this loop into potentially shooting massive amounts of energy up the food chain. So instead of just looping, loop sync, it loop links, and that's why it's called link or sync theory.
Let me just double check that we are in fact recording. We are.
Well, that's good.
That's very good. Great.
And yeah, so I just experiment with how different forms of these carbons. So I use glucose as like a substitute for algae, and then I also use nutrients as well to get actual algal carbon. So I chuck a bunch of fuel in for the algae in the bottles that I use. I use little bottles on racks that...
Like these?
No, they just look like big juice bottles.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was funny, environmental scientists leaving a bunch of plastic in a waterway, but
yep.
It's just how you do it.
Yep.
It's a way of creating a little closed system that you can...
Go back and check up on.
Exactly.
So where do you have these little setups?
We haven't set them up yet, but the next ones we're going to set up probably in about half a month or at Manly Dam.
So there you go. There's an example of a system.
Yeah.
A particular location, Manly Dam.
Yep. So, say you've got Manly Dam and a big... it rains a stupid amount, like that day where it rained and the roof broke. This washes all the vegetation and stuff into the water,
yep.
which lets all of this extra food out into the ecosystem.
Yep.
And essentially, this food, it's not quite like... The algal carbon's almost like junk food to the bacteria. They love it, they'll just fly to it and eat it all.
Yeah.
But some things absolutely love the leaf carbon or the soil carbon, and it's just because they're specialised to consume it. And so essentially the population dynamic shifts and these things just devour the carbon, absolutely devour it, and they outcompete everything for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we think happens.
Mm.
There's evidence either way, but what we've seen so far, it seems to suggest this is what's happening. And they just grow massively out of, like, almost stupidly out of control. And what we don't know is whether or not this rain event at Manly Dam will cause all the macroinvertebrates to have way more food. So all the little dragonfly larvae swimming about at the edge of the dam, whether or not they'll have essentially extra food because of all these leaves coming in. It's like an indirect food source, or whether it'll just exit the system and no one will get to use it.
Okay, so what's benefiting most from the heavy rain events?
The heavy rain events, almost definitely the bacteria.
The bacteria?
Yeah. So what we think happens is because the protozoa, they're very inefficient, they're quite greedy, so they eat up all this food and then just essentially let it all out as gas. So they just let out carbon dioxide.
CO2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so a lot of people seem to think that this is where link or sync fails, is the protozoa let off too much gas as CO2,
yep.
and the carbon never gets transported up the web. And that's why I'm also looking at the protozoa, which are the hairy, weird things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now bacteria, but if we can manage to, there's a guy in our research group who wants to do isotope tracing studies, so he'd be directly tracing the carbon up the food web. I'm just doing experimental monitoring of the protozoa, which is like the middle part that no one's studied yet. People have studied the zoops, people have zooplankton, and people have studied the bacteria. No one's studied the protozoa yet because they're weird. They don't follow any characteristics of. They don't follow our rules of life.
They don't. They're not a plant and they're not an animal.
Exactly. They're
their own thing.
Well, they can do like. That's the weird thing about them. If you've got like these things called obligate autotrophs, and that's where they're like, oh, there's heaps of sun. Fine, I guess I'll photosynthesize. That's great. I love that. But then there's food in there, and say it's an overcast day. There's not that much sun. They're like, oh, now I got to get off my ass and I got to go eat some food. They can do both.
So they can process carbon,
Mm-hmm.
and they can photosynthesize.
Yep.
So what's I suppose, common way of saying processed carbon. They can eat.
They can eat.
Like we do.
They can eat like we do.
Yeah.
But they can also make their own food like a plant does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Photosynthesize.
Yeah.
Great.
Not all of them can do that though.
Of course not.
They don't follow rules.
Nothing's that simple.
No, not with protozoa ever.
So protozoa are a pretty primal life form, are they? They've been around for a very long time.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. They're just weird.
Yeah.
It's where we lump all of the essentially bacteria and algae that we don't know what to call or where to put it because it just doesn't fit.
Okay.
The
too hard basket.
Yeah, the too hard basket. Our naming system doesn't fit them at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Now, how does this research contribute to understanding climate change?
Climate change.
You talked about CO2 going up into the atmosphere with these heavy rain events.
Well, I guess with link or sink, it's possible if the carbon's linking to upper food webs, you're potentially going to get more of a delay when the CO2 is released. Like the CO2 would probably more likely get released when a fish dies. But the climate change aspects are not my specialty on this. But anything involving carbon dioxide really, can be seen as a climate change impact.
Or a bit of the puzzle.
Yeah,
the bigger picture puzzle.
Well, yeah, if we understand, oceanic microbial loop work is super important because I think it's like 60% of the biomass in the oceans is bacteria. 60%, that's
huge.
Yeah, well, it's way more than half of everything, including all the fish and whales and
krill.
They're zooplankton, I think.
They are, but they're not aimless drifters.
Yeah, a lot of
There's a big argument among the krill biologists about that.
So they'd be zoonecton.
Who knows? They're little creatures. They're animals that have individual and collective behaviours, and they stir up the ocean. And they're often referred to as farmers of the sea. So they go up and down, there are so many.
Oh, they can control their
vertical migration.
Zooplankton can do that too. They've got a little gas bladder.
Yeah. Okay. Well, these ones have little legs and they beat around and create a lot of movement.
Animals are weird.
Animals are weird and wonderful.
Yeah, well, understanding bacteria is super important, I suppose, because they sort of do form a very base level animal of consumption in oceans and rivers. And so how they're taking up resources does directly impact the rest of the world, essentially. Like, for example, with my research, if we find out that ocean bacteria absolutely hates, for example, plants along river edges, there's going to be a lot of resources just sitting in the ocean that is probably just going to sink to the bottom and mineralise.
River edges, you mean estuaries?
Just anything on the edge of the water. It's called riparian vegetation.
Oh, on the edge of rivers.
Rivers, oceans, whatever.
Riparian is the word that just says, that means edges.
I think so, yeah.
Between land and water.
I think so. I've always used it for rivers. So
maybe me too.
Maybe there's another one for ocean and estuary.
Yeah.
But I've always just said riparian.
Yeah. See, language is tricky. We have to be really specific, don't we? When we're talking, if you're talking to a fellow scientist, you have to be very careful about your...
I always find I just learn something new whenever I get something.
Yes! That's what we're doing right here.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this recording's going to go to Melbourne.
Yep.
And a bunch of animators are going to watch it and get inspired.
Well, hopefully they can understand my rambling.
Yeah. And I'll ask you to give me some pictures and stuff and I'll send those with them.
Okay.
Anything else you want to say?
No.
Cool. Thank you.
Not a problem.